Welcome to Transform, Ignite, Disrupt, bringing you interviews and insights covering proven practical strategies to unlock your company's innovation potential. Here's your host, Stephen L. Blue.
Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Transform, Ignite, and Disrupt. And I'm just thrilled today to have maybe the best and brightest transformer, igniter, and disruptor on the planet. They call him the Marketing Jedi, and he's just got an absolute brilliant mind. And I'm just thrilled to have him here. Welcome everyone to Bert Martinez. Bert, thanks for being on the show.
You bet. I'm excited to be here, and it's always good to, to experience the other side of the podcast because, you were on my show a couple of years ago, so this is kind of fun.
Yeah, it is, and you've got a really terrific podcast that probably everybody knows about, or most people called Money for Lunch, and I don't know, you've had hundreds and hundreds of episodes, haven't you?
Yeah, so Money for Lunch was originally something that was started on CBS radio. I ended up buying it from CBS, took it independently, and it was, one of those situations, Stephen, that it was just kind of perfect timing in the sense that if this would have happened, 5 or 6 years earlier than it did, I probably would not have bought it. But because it happened at the time that podcasting and independent internet radio was coming of age, it was a perfect time. And so I bought the show from CBS, took it independent. I think we've had something like 1,500 or 1,700 episodes, thousands of guests, from Hollywood to sports to business icons, best-selling authors like yourself. So it's been a fantastic journey. Well,
timing sometimes is everything, but if you don't have the mindset and you don't have the desire and the will and the vision, timing doesn't mean a darn thing. And I know you talk a lot about what the success principles are that start in your head.
Yes. So to be to show you a little bit about, I guess, my own journey and a little bit of transparency here is so I bought the show from CBS, Money for Lunch, and then I did nothing with it for like 2 years. And one of the reasons I did nothing with it is because, frankly, I was a little fearful. I had some doubts of, okay, now that I bought this property, what do I do with it? How do I monetize it? Yeah. And it's interesting the way things evolve and develop. So what happened was I finally made the decision that no matter what, I was going to start the show up again, regardless whether I made money, regardless whether it was good, bad, and different. I was just going to do it. And the minute I made that decision, a producer friend of mine contacted me and said, hey, what are you doing? Let's catch up. And so I told him what I was doing, and he said, hey, I'll be the producer for your show. And so literally he got on board, and I think within 2 weeks he got us our very first sponsor. I think within a 30 or 40-day period, we had 4 or 5 sponsors because of him, and we were off to the races. So it's I think the number one thing, Steve, that holds all of us back, whether you're Mickey Mantle or Mickey Mouse, is the thoughts in our heads, whether it's fear or doubt or shame or guilt. These chronic conversations that we have such a massive impact in our relationships, in our money, in our health, everything.
And it's insidious, isn't it, Bert? I mean, it's like half these conversations going on in your head, you're not even aware of them.
Right. And I'm glad you said that because, they become so normal, for lack of better terms. They're just part of our everyday thought pattern. And, you're going around, maybe what you say to yourself is, I'm always late. I'm always late. And of course, you are always late. And, you hear people say that, I'm always broke, or I can't ever seem to find the right relationship. And so, these thoughts, these conversations tend to manifest themselves in our reality, because I think that is part of the power of our minds, is that we can create whatever reality we want. And we see this happen all the time. I am blessed I get to meet and do some stuff with Arnold Schwarzenegger a couple times a year. And to me, he's a great example of somebody who came to this country with no money, barely spoke any English whatsoever, and he's created his reality. And, he's gone from being a champion athlete to being a champion businessman to being a champion actor to being a champion in politics. And he's got multiple business that generate millions and millions of dollars a year. And he was told over and over again that he would never make it in acting because, his name was too big, Arnold Schwarzenegger. You couldn't even pronounce it. And his accent is too thick. And, of course, just about everybody nowadays has some level of imitation of Arnold's voice. His name is recognized globally. Yeah. Whether you like him or you don't like him, you think his movies are good or bad or whatever, he has created a massive legacy based on his thinking, based on believing in himself to even an outrageous degree, and that's what it takes.
Well, you certainly, at some point in time in your life, you broke the self-defeating loop, negative talk mold. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about where you came from, what your background was, and how did you get to be in a place where you're thinking like Bert Martinez does?
Well, like a lot of us, that journey probably took longer than I wanted. But I think it started when I became aware of the fact that what we talk about or what we think about is what we bring about. And so I'm an immigrant. I was born in Cuba, raised here in the United States. My parents were not into personal development. My parents, like a lot of parents of the great generation, if you will, they were all about hard work and and that hard work that they passed on to myself and my brothers and sister and stuff like that, my siblings, is obviously important. I think we all need to work hard or learn how to work hard. I think that is something that has been somewhat, if not completely eliminated, it's been drastically reduced or reformed in today's America, right? I mean, I don't think the spirit of hard work is something that's talked about. So bottom line is, I was, again, my parents were not positive thinkers. They were not about, feel good. They're about, responsibility and working hard and, and all that other stuff. But I think the very first time that I read something that kind of started changing my life was the old book, Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
And, that's the cornerstone, I think, for how to program your mind. And so Think and Grow Rich, and then How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yeah. And then I was hooked. And, there's a lot of people out there, Steve, that kind of, they are very negative, quote, about personal development, and they think it's a scam and all this other stuff. And the reality is whatever you think, if you hold that thought long enough, whether it's negative or positive, it tends to manifest itself in your life. And if you think that personal development and positive thinking is a scam, well, then your mind filters everything through that lens. And I always tell people that, look, positive thinking probably only works about 80% of the time. But negative thinking, I think only works about 90% of the time. And what I mean by that is my dad is a great example of negative thinker. Even though he was a very negative person, he still built a business that was very successful. My dad passed away a while back, and his business still grows forward. And he was able to build this business, despite his his thinking. He was able to build his business because he was able to find good people that were able to put up, for lack of better terms, to tolerate his way of doing things, and great for him. I think that his business probably could have done better if it wouldn't have been such a toxic environment. And to give people an idea of what I'm talking about, my dad, bless his heart, he's a very generous guy, great sense of humor, but not necessarily a people person. We had migrated, for lack of better terms. We ended up in Houston, Texas. And so my dad opened the very first Spanish newspaper there in Houston, Texas. And he constantly I'll just say it, he constantly, berated his employees, right? And of course, like a lot of family-owned businesses, the kids sooner or later started to work there, and we just could not believe some of the stuff that he would say, to the employees there. And we were shocked, and we were shocked that anybody actually worked for him and stuff like that, because he just, he was so negative. And so anyway, little by little, we were able to make some minor improvements and stuff like that. But despite his toxic approach, his business succeeded. The same thing was said about Steve Jobs. When Steve Jobs was, younger, and Apple was blowing and growing, a lot of people said that he was a very, negative person, very toxic person.
Yep.
But despite his shortcomings, he was able to build something very, very positive that's, will outlast, that has outlasted him and will continue to be his legacy. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a kind of a tough way to go through life, right? And Steve Jobs, there's a couple of interviews where he regrets the way he behaved, and he talks about living better, and he did towards the last 4 or 5 years of his life, or maybe the last 10 years of his life. People said that he was a softer, more gentler individual. But bottom line is, I personally believe, Steve, that positive, even though it may not work all the time, it's just a much healthier way to live life, and versus going through life in a very negative state of mind, and kind of like I said, being that kind of a toxic person. But anyway, so that's kind of the way I started. Very, I think normal for a lot of people raised by parents of that generation, right? There just wasn't a whole lot of positive thinking, or what we see today. And again, the work ethic is one of the things that I got from my parents. I distinctly remember when my dad's business was just getting started. He I think he started his business when he was roughly 55 years old, And so he would go to work, and then he would come back, and he would mow lawns throughout the neighborhood to earn extra money to pay for the household bills so he could devote more money towards growing his business. And, it's that kind of work ethic that I think is missing or lacking today. But bottom line is, I think everybody either has experienced or probably will experience the ability to either sheer determination get something done that may shock or surprise them, right? I mean, they get the car of their dreams, even though maybe their credit score wasn't perfect or they didn't have the right down payment. But the fact that they tried and kept trying, things worked out the way they wanted it to work out. And, I just think that generally speaking, we as human beings, we have this ability to really create our reality.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good segue into your latest book. I love this title, and maybe you can talk a little bit about it. The title of the book is Dominating Your Mind, Crush Your Fears, Destroy Your Doubts so you can be unstoppable. Did I get the title right?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. I think, dominating your mind is a very difficult thing to do. I think that, I in the book, I use a lot of examples of, real world examples, either of something that happened to me personally, or something that happened to people in my life. In the book, I do talk about people like Schwarzenegger, Tom Hopkins, and Joe Vitale, Elon Musk, and these are some of the people that, against great odds, have achieved a certain level of success. And it's just amazing when you start peeling away the layers. These are people who were able to dominate their mind, and when I mean dominate their mind, this one lady, she's a mom blogger. She thought the title was a little offensive, and so she would not review my book because she thought it was she thought it was so offensive that and again, I guess it's part of our culture about certain words being not politically correct or intolerable or things like that nature. And it's like why don't you read the book and then tell me, but she wouldn't read it, she wouldn't review it. I just thought that was funny, but it just goes to show you. And while I'm talking to her, I finally asked her. I said, did you have a bad relationship or a divorce or an abusive husband? And she said yes. So again, she filtered her life through this experience, and a lot of us do that. But dominating your mind, I tell people this: either your mind will dominate you, or you will dominate your mind. That's what the book's all about. And so it sounds kind of weird, but the reality is that we almost have like two minds. People know that we have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind, but beyond that, if you are wrestling with the thoughts in your head, it takes time and energy and discipline to dominate those thoughts or to dominate your mind and to overcome fear. When I wanted to do business with Arnold Schwarzenegger, this was like 40 years ago. Let's see, maybe 30 years ago. This is before the internet was a thing. This is before LinkedIn existed. And I had read an article or something by Tony Robbins, and he had said that you're typically 3 or 4 people from the person you want to meet.
Yeah.
And so I started asking everybody, do you know Arnold Schwarzenegger? Can you make an introduction, or do you know how I can get a hold of him? I mean, I asked that to everybody. My lawn guy, the guy shining my shoes, anybody, that I would come in contact with, the server. I would just ask this ridiculous question.
Yeah.
And here I am taking a client and his wife, and we're all going out to see this movie together. And I asked them both, hey, do you know how to get a hold of Arnold Schwarzenegger, or can you make an introduction? And the client, he's a printer by trade, Steve, and his wife is a stay-home mom. And so the businessman says, no, don't know anything about him, or don't know how to get a hold of him, or anything like that. And the stay-home mom says, I do, and I know when he's going to be, coming into town.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and so I said, well, how do you know this? And of course, the husband goes, yeah, how do you know this? And so she goes, well, the manager that I shop at GNC, and the manager there and I have become friends, and he's told me that he's coming into town because he's doing this thing for Senator Hatch. And again, this is 35 years ago. I said, well, can you give me his contact? She goes, yeah, I'll be glad to introduce you. So she introduces me to the GNC guy, who introduces me to the people putting on the event. I get I wiggle an invitation to this event, and I am eventually in the green room with Arnold, and there's like 4 or 5 people in the green room. So it's me and Arnold and Senator Hatch and Joe Weider and Ben Weider, all these people, and the event's about to start. So everybody piles out, and the only people left in the green room is myself and Schwarzenegger. And it's like, man, this is perfect, right? I mean, it just couldn't get better than this. So I pitched Schwarzenegger my idea, and he says, no, I wouldn't be interested in that. And but we stayed in contact, and here we are, like I said, 35 years later. And what this means and is a couple of things. This is what I got from this little experience, and I write this in the book, is that, first of all, Tony was right. You are 4 or 5 people or whatever it was from the person you want to meet. And today that's easier than ever. That's number one. And number two, how many times have we talked ourselves out of something because either, again, out of fear or out of, looking stupid or feeling embarrassed, whatever feelings, that hold you back, those are negative thoughts, or that, again, your mind is trying to tell you. And sometimes your mind is trying to protect you, right? Because that is part of the human makeup, is to protect you. And one way that it protects you is from being embarrassed or being rejected or being, looking foolish, right? And so if I would have listened to my mind and would have hold on to those emotions, then I wouldn't have taken the risk. And there's probably a couple of times when I've asked people hey, do you know how to get a hold of Arnold Schwarzenegger? There's probably people who snickered at me, or made fun of me after I left, but who cares? Yeah. Bottom line is, that's a massive relationship that I was able to acquire by putting myself out there, getting out of my comfort zone, by dominating my mind and pushing aside, all those emotions that come with, stepping out of your comfort zone. Yep. And so, so that to me is just one of my favorite stories. And there's many like that in the book. And the book is very simple. I mean, the thing that ultimately got me to write the book, Steve, is that I was working for a company. I was helping them with their sales and marketing, and we put together 10 affirmations. So to give everybody the background on this, and I write this in the book as well, is so I'm hired by this company. The CEO of the company wants me to help them out, and he's excited that I might be able to make some improvements. The VP of the company is not so excited, doesn't think that anything that I can do will work. And so they have 3 sales team, and so they give me the worst sales team. That way I can't screw up anything too badly.
Yeah.
And, which I don't blame them, right? And so here's the worst sales team that they have. Within, I want to say, I think it was 6 months, the sales team went from being the worst to being in second place.
Wow.
And in 9 months, they were the number 1 sales team. We set sales record after sales records after sales records, and it all came from affirmations that we would do as a team at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And I took those same affirmations when I got hired by CNN to help them with their sales team. And this is a CNN affiliate in Houston. And again, we took them from whatever they were doing. I believe it took us, again, another 6 months. Maybe it might have been a total of a year, but we were able to double their sales. And, so it's the power of dominating your mind. It's the power of, talking to yourself a little bit differently, or the power of affirmations. They are incredible.
Well, most of my listeners are, senior people in organizations, and a lot of them are CEOs, and I can't think of a CEO that doesn't want to have that kind of a dramatic impact on the sales and marketing organization. But you and I are probably in the same. We have similar backgrounds. My mother was a waitress. My father was a truck driver. I grew up dirt poor, and I'm basically a baby boomer. And a lot of people my age or near my age, CEO types, they say this whole affirmation thing is bullshit. That's just hogwash. It doesn't work. Don't talk to me about that. But you've seen and you produce measurable results using affirmations. And in fact, you have on your website that you guarantee measurable results in 48 hours.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you talk about that? Because, anal retentive CEOs that are numbers guys like me are going to go, wow, now you got my attention.
Sure. So depending on where you're at, the measurable results could be, small or big, just depending on where you're at. Yeah. But if you're a CEO, you got to where you're at really because of the way you think, right? And here's the thing. Here's the magical thing about affirmations. Everybody uses them every day. If you're the kind of person that says, I can't lose weight, I'm fat, that's an affirmation. If you're the kind of person who says, hey, I'm really lucky and I, good things happen to me, that's an affirmation. Most of us have affirmations that we use on a daily basis. Most of them are negative. So I think there's a lot of statistics out there that will say that, we have like 80,000 or 50,000 negative thoughts per day.
Yeah. Those
negative thoughts are affirmations that we rehearse day after day after day, and we do it with intensity and with emotion. So to the CEOs that are listening, to the sales managers that are listening, one of the easiest things that you can do is you can take the stuff in the book, you can apply it to, let's say, to me, one of the fastest, most measurable results is let's say you're outbound calling. Most people today still use cold calling as a way to create appointments. Yeah. So I can instantly probably double, in some cases triple the amount of appointments that are being set. And so if you have if you're let's say your sales team is closing 10% of the appointments that they see, well, without teaching them, the latest, greatest sales techniques, let's just increase their appointments.
Yeah.
So if they're seeing 10 people a week, now they're being able to see 15 people a week. They're automatically going to grow their sales. That's automatically, an improvement. And yes, we can deliver those kind of results in 48 hours. It's very simple. It's very, kind of a very easy thing to do when it comes to outbound cold calling, because we control the variables to a large degree. So that's one of the fastest things that we hone in on. And again, affirmations come into play because a lot of, and Steve, you know this, a lot of salespeople have call reluctance.
Yeah,
they're right. I mean, they don't want to be rejected.
Nope.
And so they will procrastinate picking up that phone. So we have a set of affirmations that will help salespeople pick up the phone more often, make more appointments, and shield them from being rejected or feeling rejected. Because ultimately how we feel determines what we do. And to go a little bit deeper, how we feel is more important than what we know. And to give you a really good example about this is, at least here in America, and I would say in Canada and in Europe, smokers are aware that smoking is bad for them. They're not surprised in the least, right? And for those who are smokers, I'm not trying to be offensive, but bottom line is, the same thing when it comes to overeating, right? Or eating bad food. So a smoker knows that smoking is bad for them, but they do it anyway. Why? Because the way it makes them feel. And years ago, we did a survey. When I say we, my company, we did a survey. We surveyed over 1,000 smokers. We asked them, why did you start smoking? The number one answer was that they wanted to feel accepted. They wanted to be part of the group. They wanted to feel cool. Those are the number one answers. And what that means, on a much deeper level, is they wanted to feel loved, right? I mean, if you're looking to get accepted by other people, you're looking for a form of love, right? And so we had several people from the military who their reason to start smoking was so they could get a break, because in the military they were expected to work 8 hours kind of nonstop. Put in your 8 hours, go home. And the only people who got a break were smokers. They were given a couple of minute breaks to go and smoke. And so we had, out of the 1,000 or so people that we surveyed, we had, I think, 2, might have been as many as 3, that admitted that they started smoking so they could take a break from their grind at the whatever military base they were at. So except for that exception, everybody else was all about being accepted or being loved or being part of the group, same thing. And so that's why how we feel will always trump what we know, whether it comes to food or drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or whatever you want to call it. Yep. If it makes us feel good, if it makes us feel loved, if it makes us feel important, if it makes us feel more confident, then we will do that negative, habit.
Yep. Well, that's a key takeaway I want to make sure isn't lost in the audience. And if I loop that back to the sales guy, he knows he should pick up that phone and make those calls, but he feels bad about doing it.
Yes.
So the key, I guess, I would bet in your affirmations to have him feel good about doing it.
Yes. So bottom line is, what would happen to a salesperson if they did not feel rejected? Well, they're going to ask for the money more often. They're going to ask for this appointment more often. They're going to take more no's. And we all know that if the salesperson that is willing to take the most rejection is going to be the most successful.
Yep.
And if I can come in, for lack of better terms, reprogram their thinking when it comes to being rejected so where it no longer bothers them or they don't feel rejected, then that salesperson will be transformed, their numbers will be transformed, and you do that enough times in that sales environment, and then you'll start making new records. You'll start breaking old records.
Yep. Yeah, because it ends up being a numbers game.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, and there's a lot of people tell you, hey, it's more than a numbers game. Well, at the end of the day, it's how many people were you able to pitch? How many people, how many no's were you willing to take before you walked away from the sales environment? So, one of the other things that we did in both at CNN and this other place is that we created a series of affirmations to get the salespeople to take a minimum of 3 no's. And because we were able to reprogram them and we gave them the tools to be able to handle 3, 4, 5 no's, sales increased just from that one exercise. So you're making more appointments, you're taking more no's, you're going to increase your sales.
Yep, I agree with you completely. It's a numbers game, and you got to get you got to wade in there, otherwise you can't get the numbers.
Right. And you still have to have a good product. You still have to be a good salesperson. All those things don't change, but if you want to master the art of selling, you got to be bulletproof. You got to be willing to take a bunch of rejection. You got to be willing to take a bunch of no's. And the most successful people in the world are the ones who have taken the most no's and also the biggest no's. I mentioned when you and I were talking before the show about my mastermind group, and one of the things that we did at the end of last year, somebody in the mastermind group said, hey, has anybody here sold a $1 million widget? Not that they've done over $1 million in a year or whatever, but a $1 million contract.
Yep.
And that kind of sparked some inspiration. And so one of the things that our mastermind group is working on right now is pitching a $1 million deal. And again, and Steve, you know this, whether you're pitching a $1,000 deal, a $10,000 deal, a $100,000 deal, or $1 million deal, it's all the same. It's getting in front of the right customer, giving them the value that they're looking for, and they're going to sign on the dotted line. And so one of the things that we started working with in the mastermind group is everybody is creating their $1 million pitch. And let me tell you, when it's that kind of thinking that inspires people, it motivates people, and changes your life. Because if it takes you, let's say, 10 no's or 10 appointments to sell $1 million deal, then why not do it? Because that's really what it's going to take. If you're closing 1 out of 10, or maybe 1 out of 20, or maybe you're closing 1 out of 100, whatever your closing ratio is, it doesn't change just because you're asking for more money. And you and I both know there's companies out there every day who are selling not just $1 million deal or $1 million contract, but a multi-million-dollar contract. Yep. And it's just changing our thinking, once again, dominating your mind to saying, hey, instead of me trying to make $1 million a year, let me make $1 million per sale. That's a game changer.
Yep. Sure is. Well, I could talk to you for hours and hours, but I don't want to take up any more of your time. I want to encourage all of my listeners to pick up the book, Dominating Your Mind, Crush Your Fears, Destroy Your Doubts, so you could be unstoppable. I imagine Amazon has that book, Bert?
Yeah, so let me tell you what we did, Steve, so the book is available on Amazon. It's $20 on Amazon. If you go to dominatingyourmind.com for the next, I think we just did this, for the next 10 days, we're giving away the book for free. You pay for, I forgot, I think it's like $5 for shipping or something like that. You pay whatever the shipping cost is, the shipping and handling. You get the book for free, and that's going to go on for the next 7 days. My producer just told me yes for the next 7 days. So they can go to dominatingyourmind.com and get the book for free, or they can go to Amazon and pay for it there, whichever is more convenient for them.
Well, that's great. How do people get hold of you, Bert?
Well, if somebody wants to get a hold of me specifically, they can go to Bert, B-E-R-T, Martinez, M-A-R-T-I-N-E-Z.com, BertMartinez.com, and that's a great place to start. I'm available at all the different social media outlets, and always looking to talk to people about helping them out whichever way we can.
Well, that's fantastic, Bert. I want to thank you so much for being our guest today. Honestly, and I'm not just saying this because I don't say it to every guest, this has been the most fun and the most enlightening of a podcast I've done in a long time, and my listeners and I thank you so much for sharing your insight.
Absolutely, Steve. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate your time.
You bet.
You've been listening to Transform, Ignite, Disrupt. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit StephenLBlue.com.